Chuck Todd is NBC's political director and the moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, good morning. Always good to see you. Let's go back to the Khashoggi story. NBC News and Washington Post reporting that the CIA believes it's highly likely that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia directly ordered the murder of Khashoggi, the journalist. If this report comes out on Tuesday that the president has promised from the CIA and shows that that in fact is what happened, the question for President Trump is, what now? Will he actually put more sanctions on? Will he actually do something substantive about it?
Look, and I think the question is whether his hand is going to get forced. I think there is going to be a bipartisan majority in the United States Senate and in the United States House to do something more than what has been proposed so far. And that more is this. If you're going to sanction a bunch of people in Saudi Arabia over this, does it really matter if you don't sanction the man at the top,
right,
the Crown Prince himself, Mohammed bin Salman? If MBS, who's known as MBS, referred to as MBS by a lot of government officials here, if they don't sanction him, and the president yesterday, you could tell they keep trying to find a way to punish Saudi Arabia without punishing MBS. That is where I think this is where the fight's going to be. I'm going to talk to Lindsey Graham this morning, Republican from South Carolina. I think he's one of those that would like to see tougher sanctions in Saudi Arabia. The question is he ready to go all the way up to MBS? That to me is going to be an interesting answer that I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say on this one, because I think that's where this fight's going to end up being about.
Yeah, and the Washington Post is reporting even this morning, Chuck, that the president remains skeptical even of the CIA's conclusion that there is a high confidence that MBS was behind it. The president also spent part of his week, Chuck, answering written questions from the special counsel's office from Robert Mueller. While he was answering those questions, he found time to tweet against the special counsel's office, again calling it a witch hunt, a mess, a gang of thugs. He says Robert Mueller is highly conflicted. What's the degree of pressure that the president is feeling right now about the Mueller investigation?
Boy, it certainly looks like, remember the old commercial, never let them see you sweat?
Yeah.
I feel like we saw the president sweating in real time this week. Apparently, he didn't like answering those questions, and he let us know about what he thought about the Mueller probe. Do you know that before this week, he actually went during the, quote, quiet period? The president went quiet on Mueller, only one time even using either Mueller or witch hunt in a tweet over a 50-day period until he blew up last week. I think it indicates a couple of things. He knows the Democrats have power in the House to go after some investigations. He knows that Matt Whitaker is not going over well, even with Republicans in the Senate. And the questions themselves, obviously, it irritates him that he had to do it. So I think the combination of all of that, that's why you saw, I think, the tirade. The question is it a tirade that he'll tie to something and insist on the firing, or is just the usual sort of presidential expression of exasperation, but he actually won't do anything about it?
And it still remains to be seen whether or not he'll sit for an interview. Right now, it's just written questions with the special counsel's office. Yeah. Chuck, thanks so much. We'll look for much more this morning on Meet the Press. As Chuck mentioned, he'll be joined by Senator Lindsey Graham and also by Democrat Sherrod Brown of Ohio.